One wrong door opened, and my alien friend's feelings were revealed. The airlock hissed open with the usual pressurized sigh, but Kieran Voss knew immediately he'd entered the wrong section. The corridor should have led to Storage Bay 7, mundane crates of supplies, protein rations, and spare parts for the navigation array. Instead, he found himself in a chamber he'd never seen in 3 months aboard the Meridian's Hope. The room pulsed with soft, ethereal light. Hundreds, no, thousands, of crystalline structures floated in the air like frozen rain, each one glowing from within with colors he had no names for. Some swirled with warm amber, others with deep violet. They drifted in patterns that seemed almost musical, responding to each other in ways that made his chest tighten with inexplicable emotion. "Beautiful," he whispered, stepping further inside. The moment his boot crossed the threshold, the crystals flared brighter. The nearest one pulsed, and suddenly Kieran saw himself, or rather, he saw through someone else's eyes. He was leaning over the navigation console 6 weeks ago, explaining a course correction, his brow furrowed in concentration. But the perspective wasn't his. The angle, the focus on the curve of his jaw, the way the viewer's attention lingered on his hands as they moved across the holographic display. His breath caught. He knew who this memory belonged to. Kieran. He spun around. Ceres stood in the doorway, her silver-blue skin paling to nearly white. Her large, dark eyes, like pools of endless space, widened in what he'd learned to recognize as shock. The elegant ridges that curved from her temples to her collarbones flushed a deep purple. "I'm sorry, I thought this was the storage bay. The door code was mine." Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "This is... Kieran, you shouldn't be here." But he was here, and now another crystal drifted toward him, this one amber gold. Without thinking, he reached out. The moment his finger brushed its surface, warmth flooded through him. He was in the observation deck, 3 months ago, during his first week aboard. The memory perspective watched him stare out at the stars, his reflection ghostly in the reinforced glass. He remembered this moment. He'd felt alone, questioning whether he'd made the right choice leaving Earth. But through Ceres's memory, he felt something else, a gentle concern, a curiosity, an ache to comfort him that she'd held back. "Stop." Ceres's voice cracked. She moved toward him with that fluid grace her people possessed, her long fingers outstretched. "Please, don't touch them." "What is this place?" He withdrew his hand, but his eyes couldn't leave the floating constellation of crystals. There were so many. How long had she been collecting these? "It's..." She struggled with the words, her accent thickening with distress. "In my language, Velanthir, a keeping place. For Veltharians, emotions are not spoken. They are crystallized, preserved, protected." Protected from what? From being seen before one is ready to share them. Her hand rose to her throat, a gesture he'd noticed she made when uncomfortable. From being misunderstood. From causing pain when they are unwanted. The implications crashed over him like a wave. Every crystal in this chamber was a feeling she'd had, carefully extracted and stored. And from what he'd already seen, many of them were about him. How many of these are? Too many. She moved past him, her shoulder nearly brushing his as she reached for the amber crystal still glowing from his touch. She cradled it gently, and Kieran noticed her hands trembling. "This was not how you were meant to know." "Know what?" Ceres turned to face him fully, and for the first time since he'd met her, she looked utterly vulnerable. The composed, brilliant xenolinguist who could decipher dead languages and navigate first-contact protocols stood before him with her heart, quite literally, exposed. "That our friendship crossed into something else for me long ago." She gestured at the chamber. "That I have been keeping these moments because speaking them felt impossible. Because humans and Veltharians do not. Because you never indicated." She trailed off, and the silence between them grew dense with 3 months of unspoken longing. Kieran's mind raced through every interaction they'd shared. Late shifts on the bridge. Shared meals in the observation deck. Her quiet presence beside him during difficult jumps through unstable space. He'd thought they were friends, close friends, certainly, but he'd never imagined she might feel. How long, he asked softly. Does it matter? Ceres's laugh was bitter. You were not supposed to walk through that door, Kieran. You were not supposed to see my Valenthea. Now everything is complicated. Or, he said carefully, taking a single step toward her, now everything is finally clear. Her expression shifted, hope and fear warring across her delicate features. The crystals around them pulsed brighter, responding to the surge of emotion in the chamber. In that moment, with truth hanging in the air like light without a source, Kieran realized that the mission, the danger, even the vast darkness outside the ship's hull had faded away. All that remained was this: Ceres, her hidden feelings crystallized and floating between them, and the sudden knowledge that he'd been too blind to see what had been growing right in front of him. Ceres, he began, but she shook her head. Don't. Not yet. Let me. She pressed the crystal she held to her chest, and it dissolved into light that sank back into her. Let me put these away. Let me think. This isn't how we share such things among my people. Then teach me, Kieran said. Teach me how it's supposed to be done. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw the same thing he'd felt looking at her crystallized memories, a longing that had been carefully contained, now spilling free. That, she whispered, may be even more dangerous than this accident. The confession without words. The navigation briefing the next morning felt like walking through a minefield. Kieran kept his focus on the holographic star charts, acutely aware of Ceres standing 3 feet away, her posture perfect and professional. Captain Orev droned on about the upcoming asteroid field traverse, but Kieran barely heard him. Every time he glanced at Ceres, he saw those crystals. Every casual movement of her hands reminded him of how they'd trembled in her chamber. Voss, you're with me. Ceres's voice cut through his thoughts as the briefing ended. We need to recalibrate the forward sensors before the field approach. The others filed out, leaving them alone in the briefing room. The door sealed with a soft hiss. We should talk about, Kieran started. We should focus on not dying in an asteroid field. Ceres pulled up a diagnostic screen, not meeting his eyes. That is the priority. Ceres. Among my people, she interrupted, her fingers moving rapidly across the display, what you witnessed last night is equivalent to. She paused, searching for words. Imagine I had taken every private thought you'd ever had about me and read them without permission. Imagine I knew every dream, every fleeting attraction, every moment you looked at me and felt something you chose not to voice. Kieran's throat tightened. I didn't mean to invade. I know. She finally looked at him, and her expression was complex. Shame, longing, resignation all mixed together. That is what makes this worse. You wandered into truth by accident, and now I cannot take it back. I cannot unknow that you know. He moved closer, carefully. What if I don't want you to take it back? Ceres's breath hitched. The ridges along her neck flushed that deep purple again. You don't understand what you're saying. Those crystals, they are not just memories. When a Valtharian creates one, we extract the emotion itself. We feel it, fully and completely, and then we crystallize it so we no longer have to carry it inside us. You've been removing your feelings for me. Preserving them, she corrected. Keeping them safe. Every time I felt something too intense, too dangerous, I would go to my Valenthea and create a crystal. Then I could continue working beside you without my emotions interfering. Kieran processed this. How many times? Too many to count. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. The first was 2 months ago. You were exhausted after a triple shift, and you fell asleep at your station. I covered your watch, and when I looked at you sleeping there, I felt everything. It frightened me. So I crystallized it. And after that, it kept happening. Ceres turned away from him, facing the viewport where stars streaked past in faster-than-light blur. The way you laugh at my attempts at human humor. How you bring me earth coffee even though you know I find it bitter. The time you stayed up all night helping me debug the translation algorithms, even though linguistics isn't your field. Each moment became a crystal. I thought I was managing it, Kieran. I thought I was being responsible. By hiding how you felt. By not burdening you with emotions you didn't ask for. She pressed her palm against the cold glass. Humans are so free with feelings. You speak them, casually. I love this food. I hate this shift. But for Veltharians, to speak a deep emotion is to make it real, to make it the other person's responsibility to acknowledge or reject. I couldn't do that to our friendship. Kieran stood beside her now, close enough that he could see his own reflection in the viewport alongside hers, human and Veltharian, side by side. What if I wanted that responsibility? She turned her head, and they were suddenly face to face, barely inches apart. You don't know what you're saying. Then show me. The words came out rougher than he intended. You said last night you could teach me. Show me one of those memories. Let me see what you've been feeling. Kieran. I'm asking. Isn't that different than accidentally seeing them? Ceres studied his face, and he could see her internal struggle. Finally, she reached into the small satchel at her waist and withdrew a single crystal, this one a soft pink that swirled with gold at its center. This one is from 2 weeks ago, she said quietly. We were in the observation deck. You were showing me the constellation patterns from your childhood on Earth. I remember that night. Do you remember when our hands touched, reaching for the same star chart? He did. It had been casual, accidental. Or so he'd thought. Hold out your hand, Ceres instructed. Kieran obeyed. She placed the crystal in his palm, then covered his hand with both of hers. The warmth of her touch sent electricity up his arm. Close your eyes and open your mind. The moment he did, the world shifted. Suddenly he wasn't standing in the briefing room, he was in the observation deck 2 weeks ago, but experiencing it through Ceres's senses. The star chart felt different under these fingers, the ambient temperature registered differently, and when his own hand entered the memory's field of vision, reaching for the same chart, everything in Ceres's awareness narrowed to that point of contact. The touch lasted perhaps 2 seconds in reality. In the memory, it stretched into eternity. He felt the electricity of skin on skin, the way her breathing stopped, the rush of heat through her body. He felt how she wanted to turn her hand over, to lace their fingers together, to pull him closer. He felt the restraint it took to simply smile and move her hand away as if nothing had happened. The intensity of it staggered him. This was what she'd felt from a 2-second accidental touch? Kieran opened his eyes, breathing hard. Ceres was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. That's what I've been crystallizing, she said. Dozens of times. Moments that felt too big to carry. Ceres. He was still holding the crystal, still feeling the echo of her longing. I had no idea. That was the point. She tried to pull her hands back, but he held firm. I need to tell you something, Kieran said. I've been sleeping in the starboard observation deck instead of my quarters. She blinked, confused by the apparent subject change. Why? Because it's where you go during gamma shift when you can't sleep. I started taking my rest periods there 6 weeks ago, hoping we'd overlap. Hoping for exactly the kind of conversations we've been having. Her lips parted in surprise. I don't have crystals to show you, he continued, his thumb unconsciously stroking the back of her hand. But I've been carrying my own feelings, Ceres. I just thought, humans and Veltharians don't typically, and you never indicated. Oh, she breathed. Yeah. Oh. They stood there, hands clasped around a crystallized confession, the truth finally settling between them like gravity. This complicates everything, Ceres whispered, but she didn't pull away. Or, Kieran echoed his words from the night before, this finally makes everything make sense. The ship's alert chimed, 30 minutes to asteroid field entry. Duty called. But neither of them moved, caught in the space between what was and what could be. After the field traverse, Ceres said finally, come back to my Velanthere. There are more crystals. If you truly want to understand, I will share them all with you. All of them. Every single one. Her voice steadied with decision. If we're going to do this, if we're going to try, then no more hiding. Among my people, to share one's Velanthere completely is the highest form of trust. The deepest intimacy. Kieran's heart hammered. More intimate than anything physical, yes. A small smile curved her lips. For Veltharians, sex is simple. Emotional vulnerability is terrifying. Then I'm honored, he said seriously. And after you show me yours, maybe I can find a way to show you mine. Humans don't crystallize emotions. No, he agreed. But we have other ways of showing what we feel. The alert chimed again. 20 minutes. Ceres reluctantly pulled her hands free, taking the crystal back and tucking it away. Don't die in this asteroid field, Kieran Voss. Wouldn't dream of it. I have an appointment to keep. As they moved toward the door, professional masks sliding back into place, Kieran felt the weight of anticipation settle over him. The asteroid field suddenly seemed like a minor obstacle compared to what waited on the other side, a complete crystallized confession of everything Ceres had been hiding. He couldn't wait. Breaking protocol. The asteroid field was a nightmare of spinning rock and debris, remnants of a planetary collision that had occurred millennia ago. Kieran's hands flew across the navigation console while Ceres managed the shield modulation beside him, her calculations predicting impact zones before the sensors could register them. Debris cluster at Mark 7-3, she called out. Rolling starboard, compensating. His fingers danced across the controls. They worked in perfect synchronization, as they always had. But now every movement felt charged with new meaning. When Ceres leaned across to adjust the secondary display, her shoulder pressed against his for 3 heartbeats. When Kieran reached past her for the thrust controls, his arm brushed hers. Each touch was an echo of that crystal memory, casual, necessary, and absolutely electric. Large fragment incoming, Captain Orev's voice came through from the bridge. Navigator, I need a solution. Kieran's eyes scanned the projected path. It's moving too fast. We can't avoid it completely. Then don't avoid it. Ceres's fingers flew across her display. Let it come. I'm recalibrating the shields to channel the impact force into a gravity assist. We'll use its momentum to slingshot through the next cluster. It was brilliant and insane. Kieran pulled up the calculations. The margin for error was razor-thin. If your timing is off by even half a second, it won't be. She looked at him, and her eyes held absolute certainty. Trust me. He did. God help him, he did. Captain, the Xena specialist has a plan. Permission to execute. A pause. Your call, Voss. She's your partner. The weight of that statement, your partner, settled between them. Kieran made his decision. On your mark, Ceres. She called out numbers, her voice steady as stone. Kieran's hands hovered over the controls, every muscle coiled and ready. The asteroid filled the viewport, a mountain of ancient rock hurtling toward them at impossible speed. 3, 2, 1. Now. Kieran executed the maneuver exactly as Ceres had calculated. The asteroid struck their forward shields with enough force to make the ship shudder, alarm screaming. But instead of crumpling under the impact, the Meridian's Hope spun, caught the gravitational wake, and rocketed forward through a gap in the debris field that hadn't existed seconds before. Clear, Kieran gasped. We're clear. The bridge erupted in relieved chatter. Captain Orev was praising their teamwork. But Kieran barely heard any of it. Because Ceres had grabbed his hand, not accidentally, not professionally, but deliberately. Her fingers were wrapped around his on the control panel, and she was looking at him with an expression of pure exhilaration. We did it, she breathed. You did it. That was incredible. No. Her grip tightened. I calculate, you execute. Like always. They stayed like that, hands joined on the console, until Captain Orev's voice cut through. Good work, you two. Stand down and get some rest. That was too close. The bridge crew began cycling out for shift change. Kieran and Ceres remained, neither willing to break contact first. This is inappropriate, Ceres murmured, but she didn't move. We're still on duty. 3 more minutes until shift change. Kieran. 3 minutes. He turned his hand over, palm against palm, fingers sliding between hers. Then we follow protocol. But for 3 minutes, let me just. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Ceres's eyes fluttered closed, and he felt her breathing synchronize with his. Among her people, this prolonged touch was meaningful. She'd said emotional sharing was more intimate than anything physical, and right now, standing hand in hand in the empty navigation bay, he understood what she meant. He could feel her pulse through her palm. Could sense the way she relaxed incrementally, as if allowing herself something she denied for too long. I thought about this, she admitted quietly. During the approach, when we were calling out coordinates, I thought about what would happen if I just reached over and took your hand. If I stopped pretending those accidental touches were accidents. Were they? Accidents. Some. Not all. She opened her eyes. I have another crystal of tonight. Of watching you navigate, of the trust in your voice when you said on your mark. Of this moment right now. Already. I felt it happening in real time. The emotion was too strong not to preserve. Her thumb traced his knuckles. But this time, I knew you would see it eventually. That changed everything. How? Creating a crystal knowing it will be shared feels different than creating one to hide. It feels like. She searched for the word. Like writing a letter I actually intend to send. The shift change alert chimed. 3 minutes had passed. The night crew would arrive any moment. Reluctantly, Kieran released her hand. Your Velanthea. Are we still? Yes. Ceres straightened her uniform, composing herself. My quarters. 1 hour. That gives me time to prepare. Prepare. To share one's complete Velanthea is a ritual among my people. There are traditions. Ways to make the experience less overwhelming for both parties. She hesitated. I should warn you, seeing this many intimate memories at once can be intense. Some Veltharians spend years sharing their collections with partners, revealing them gradually. And you're going to show me everything in one night. We are in uncharted space, Kieran. The mission ends in 6 months. If something happens, if we don't survive, I don't want to leave these feelings unspoken. Her eyes met his with fierce intensity. I've hidden long enough. The night crew began filing in. Ceres gave him one last look, part invitation, part warning, before leaving the navigation bay. Kieran stood alone, his palms still warm from her touch, his mind racing with anticipation. 1 hour. In 1 hour, he would see everything Ceres had been feeling. Every moment she'd crystallized, every emotion she'd preserved instead of speaking. The prospect terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. He headed to his quarters to shower and change, trying to steady his racing heart. This was happening. They were really doing this. Months of careful friendship, of professional distance, of wondering what if. All of it was about to transform into something neither of them could predict. As he stood under the sonic shower, Kieran realized he was afraid. Not of what he might see in Ceres's crystals, but of what it would mean afterward. Once they crossed this line, there was no going back to comfortable friendship. They would either become something more or destroy what they had. But when he thought of her hand in his, of the trust in her eyes when she'd said on your mark, he knew the risk was worth it. Some doors, once opened, were meant to stay open. The touch that translates. Ceres's quarters were transformed. The harsh ship lighting had been dimmed to a soft glow, and in the center of the room, her Velanthea crystals floated in a careful spiral pattern, arranged by color and intensity. Hundreds of them, each one a confession she'd been too afraid to voice. She stood waiting, dressed in traditional Veltharian sharing robes, simple, flowing fabric in deep midnight blue that left her arms bare. Among her people, bare skin was required for memory sharing. The physical contact enhanced the connection. You came, she said, though her tone suggested she doubted he would. I promised. Kieran stepped inside, and the door sealed behind him with a finality that made his pulse quicken. Ceres, this is incredible. This is 3 months of cowardice, she corrected, gesturing at the floating constellation. 3 months of feeling instead of speaking. That's not cowardice. That's self-preservation. She smiled sadly. Perhaps both. She moved to the center of the spiral, and the crystals responded to her presence, pulsing gently. I've arranged them chronologically. The oldest memories are amber and gold, curiosity, friendship, the beginning of attraction. The middle ones turn pink and rose, deeper feelings, desire, longing. And these. She indicated the cluster of deep violet crystals. These are from the last few weeks. These are love. The word hung in the air between them like a physical thing. Kieran's breath caught. I need you to understand what you're agreeing to, Ceres continued, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. When you touch these crystals while I guide the connection, you won't just see memories. You'll feel everything I felt in those moments. My confusion, my desire, my fear. It will be as if my emotions are your own. Some humans find the experience overwhelming. I want to understand. Kieran moved closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. Show me. All of it. Ceres extended her hand, palm up. Then we begin with the oldest memory. The first time I crystallized what I felt for you. He placed his hand in hers, and she guided him to a large amber crystal that pulsed with warm light. Together, they touched it. The world dissolved. Suddenly Kieran was Ceres, 2 months ago, standing in the navigation bay at the end of a triple shift. His exhausted human form was slumped over the console, breathing deeply in sleep. Through Ceres's eyes, he looked vulnerable and beautiful, and the urge to brush the dark hair from his forehead was almost painful in its intensity. But more than the visual memory, he felt her emotions, the tenderness that bloomed in her chest, the fear that accompanied it, the certainty that this human had become dangerously important to her. He felt her decision to crystallize the feeling rather than examine it too closely. The memory faded. Kieran gasped, returning to his own body. That's just the beginning, Ceres warned. Are you certain? Yes. They moved through the spiral together, touching crystal after crystal. Each one was a revelation. He felt her amusement at his terrible attempts to pronounce Veltharian phrases, tinged with affection at how hard he tried. He experienced her surprise the first time he brought her earth coffee, and the way such a simple gesture had cracked something in her carefully maintained walls. He lived through her perspective of their late-night conversations, feeling how she memorized the sound of his laugh, the gestures he made when excited about an idea. The pink crystals were more intense. He felt her physical awareness of him, the way his proximity affected her breathing, how she noticed the line of his shoulders, the warmth of his body when they worked side by side. One memory captured the time he'd rolled up his sleeves to help with a manual repair, and Ceres's fascination with the way human forearms looked had been so distracting she'd nearly dropped her tools. I had no idea, Kieran murmured as that memory faded. That was the point. Ceres's voice was thick with emotion. I thought if I preserved these feelings, I could remain professional. But I just kept collecting more. They reached the violet crystals, the ones she'd called love. Ceres hesitated before the first one. These are different, she warned. These aren't just attraction or fondness. These are complete. When you feel these, you'll know exactly how much power you have over me. How much it would destroy me if you rejected what you see here. Ceres. I need you to know that before we continue. I need you to understand that I'm trusting you with everything I am. Kieran raised their joined hands and pressed his lips to her knuckles, a gesture he knew was significant in Veltharian culture, a sign of deep respect. I understand. And I'm honored. Show me. They touched the violet crystal together. The emotion that flooded through him was staggering. This memory was from last week. He'd found Ceres in the observation deck, staring out at a particularly beautiful nebula. He'd asked if she was all right, and she'd smiled and said she was just thinking. Such a simple exchange. But through her eyes, he felt the weight of unspoken words. The urge to turn to him and say I love you had been so strong she'd physically ached with it. The knowledge that he stood 2 feet away, close enough to touch, while an impossible distance yawned between what she felt and what she could express, it had been torture. She'd created this crystal the moment she returned to her quarters, crystallizing the love before it consumed her. When the memory released him, Kieran found tears on his cheeks. Ceres. There are 15 more like that one, she whispered. 15 times in the last 3 weeks that I almost told you. 15 times I chose preservation over confession. Why? Because I was afraid. Because I thought it would ruin what we had. Because. He kissed her. It was instinct, need, 3 months of his own unspoken feelings finally finding expression. His hands framed her face, and when her lips parted in surprise, he deepened the kiss, trying to pour everything he couldn't articulate into the contact. Ceres made a sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob, and kissed him back with desperate intensity. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and the crystals around them blazed brilliant white, responding to the surge of shared emotion. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ceres was crying. I need to show you the rest, she insisted. You need to see all of it. Later. Kieran's thumb wiped away her tears. Right now, I need to show you something. What? How humans share feelings without crystals. He kissed her again, slower this time, reverent. His hands traced the ridges along her collarbone, something he'd wondered about for months, and felt her shiver beneath his touch. When his lips moved to her throat, she gasped his name. Is this, he paused, checking. Is this okay? In your culture? More than okay. Her fingers tangled in his hair. Kieran, among my people, physical intimacy after sharing one's Velanthir is considered sacred. It's the next step. The completion. Then let me complete it. They moved together toward her sleeping platform, the crystals following like an honor guard of witnesses. Clothes were removed with trembling hands, his uniform, her robes, until nothing remained between them but skin and honesty. Ceres's body was lithe and strong, her silver-blue skin luminous in the crystal light. The ridges that decorated her collarbone continued down her sternum, and Kieran traced them with fingers and lips, learning her topography like a new star chart. When they finally joined together, Ceres reached for the largest violet crystal and pressed it between their joined hands. So you can feel what I feel, she whispered. Right now. The crystal activated, and suddenly Kieran experienced his own touch through Ceres's senses. Felt how every kiss registered like starlight on her skin, how his whispered words in her ear made her feel cherished and desired and completely seen. He felt her love for him, vast and terrifying and absolutely certain. And through their connection, Ceres felt his response, the answering love he'd been carrying, the way she made him feel whole, the certainty that this was right, that they were right. They moved together, the crystal between them amplifying every sensation and emotion until neither could tell where one ended and the other began. When the pleasure crested, they cried out in unison, the crystals around them shattering into light that rained down like stars. In the aftermath, they lay tangled together, sweat-slicked and trembling. The destroyed crystals had released their stored emotions back into Ceres, and she wept, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally feeling everything she'd been hiding. I've got you, Kieran murmured, holding her close. I've got you. I love you, she said, speaking the words for the first time without crystallizing them. I love you, Kieran Voss. I love you too. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I think I have for a while. I just didn't know if we. We're uncharted space, Ceres said, echoing her earlier words. No one knows if human Veltharian bonding is sustainable. We have no templates, no success stories. Then we'll be the first. Kieran pulled her closer. We'll create our own template. Ceres smiled against his chest, and for the first time in months, she felt light. Free. Known. Yes, she whispered. Yes, we will. A new language. 3 weeks passed, and the Meridian's Hope continued its mission through uncharted sectors. But for Kieran and Ceres, everything had changed. They didn't hide their relationship. On a ship this small, there was no point. Captain Orev had raised an eyebrow when they'd requested shared quarters, then simply updated the crew manifest with a notation. Bonded pair, cultural accommodation approved. Their quarters became a hybrid space that reflected both their cultures. Ceres's remaining crystals, the ones that hadn't shattered during their first night together, floated in one corner, a gentle reminder of where they'd begun. Kieran had added touches from Earth, a small succulent plant in biostasis, photographs of places he wanted to show her someday, a handwritten journal where he documented their relationship in words rather than crystals. "What are you writing?" Ceres asked one evening, emerging from the sonic shower with her hair still damp. "About today." Kieran looked up from his journal. "About how you laughed when I mispronounced Velanthir again. About the way you touch my hand when you're thinking. About how much I love watching you work." "You're creating your own memory crystals," she observed, settling beside him. "Just with pen and paper." "Exactly." He showed her the entry. "This is how humans preserve feelings. We write them down, or we just hold them in our hearts and let them inform everything we do." Ceres studied the handwriting, uniquely human, imperfect and beautiful. "Can I try?" "Of course." She took the pen awkwardly, unused to such primitive technology, and slowly wrote. "Today Kieran sang to me in the observation deck. His voice is terrible but his joy is perfect. I did not need to crystallize this feeling because I wanted to carry it inside me always." Kieran read her words and felt his throat tighten. "You're learning. You're teaching me." She set the pen aside and created a small crystal, this one deliberately, consciously. It glowed soft pink. "But I still make these sometimes. Not to hide feelings, but to share them with you. May I?" He held out his hand, and they touched the crystal together. The memory was from that morning, Ceres's perspective of waking up with Kieran beside her, watching him sleep in the early shift light. The emotion attached wasn't desperate or painful like her old crystals. It was simply peace. Contentment. The quiet certainty of being exactly where she belonged. "I like this version better," Kieran said as the memory faded. "The one where I get to see it." "So do I." Ceres took the crystal and placed it with the others, a growing collection of their shared life. "I'm building a new Velanthir. One without secrets. What will you do with them?" "Among my people, when a bonded pair reaches old age, they combine their crystals and create a memorial, a testament to their life together. Anyone who touches it can experience their entire love story." "That's beautiful." "It's also terrifying. Every fight, every mistake, every moment of doubt, it all becomes part of the permanent record." She smiled. "But I think I want that with you. The messy truth, not the carefully curated version." Kieran pulled her into his lap, the journal forgotten. "Have I told you today how extraordinary you are?" "Only 3 times. Unacceptable. I'm clearly slacking." She laughed, that full, genuine sound she'd started making more often, and kissed him. "You're extraordinary too. Even if you can't pronounce basic Veltharian. In my defense, your language has sounds humans aren't built for. Perhaps I should teach you differently." Ceres stood and moved to the floating crystals. She selected one, deep blue, different from the emotional ones. "This is a linguistic memory. I created it when I was first learning your cultural context for physical affection. Would you like to experience how I understand human romance?" "Always." They touched the crystal, and Kieran was flooded with information. Every human romance novel Ceres had studied, every cultural briefing she'd absorbed, every observation she'd made about human courtship. He saw himself through her analytical framework, the way she'd catalogued his flirting techniques, often unintentional, his body language, apparently very expressive, his tendency to show care through acts of service rather than words. "You studied me," he said, amazed. "I studied everything about human bonding. I wanted to understand what you might need from me, how to speak your emotional language." She looked almost embarrassed. "I even read 17 romance novels from Earth. They were educational." Kieran burst out laughing. "You did research? That's the most Ceres thing I've ever heard. I wanted to do this right." She swatted his arm playfully. "Human Veltharian relationships don't have precedent. I had to improvise based on available data." "And the data said?" "That humans need verbal affirmation, physical touch, and something called quality time. That they express love through words as much as actions. That they like to be." She consulted her memory. Swept off their feet. Is that what you're trying to do? Sweep me off my feet. I swept you into my Velanthir. Is that not sufficient? He pulled her close again, nuzzling her neck. More than sufficient. But I appreciate the research. They stayed like that for a while, comfortable in the silence. Outside their viewport, unfamiliar stars wheeled past. In 4 months, the Meridian's Hope would complete its mission and return to known space. Decisions would need to be made, about their future, about where they belonged, about whether their relationship could survive outside the bubble of this ship. But for now, they had this, shared quarters, floating crystals, a handwritten journal, and each other. Kieran. Ceres's voice was soft. When we return, what happens? He'd been wondering the same thing. I don't know. We figure it out together. My homeworld won't understand this. They'll see you as a curiosity, our bond as an anomaly. And Earth won't be much better. But, he tilted her chin up so their eyes met. I don't need them to understand. I just need you. That's very romantic, she said. Did you learn that from my research novels? Actually, I learned it from touching your crystals. You taught me that some feelings are too big for anyone else to understand. They only matter to the people feeling them. Ceres's eyes shimmered, the Veltharian equivalent of tears. I love you. I love you too. He kissed her softly. And when we get back, we'll request an assignment together. There are deep space research stations that need both navigators and xenolinguists. We'll find somewhere we can just be us. Uncharted space, she murmured. Always. Ceres created one more crystal, this one bright white, almost clear. She didn't make him touch it, just held it up to the light. What's that one? This moment. Right now. You promising me a future, me believing you. I want to remember this exactly as it is, hope and love and possibility all mixed together. She placed it in the center of their collection, where it pulsed gently, casting rainbow light across their quarters. In Veltharian tradition, Ceres said, the clearest crystal in a Velanthir represents the moment a person knew, without doubt, that they'd found their match. I just created mine. Kieran looked at the crystal, then at Ceres, brilliant, vulnerable, extraordinary Ceres, and felt something settle in his chest. He picked up his journal and wrote, Tonight, Ceres created her clarity crystal. I don't need a crystal to know she's my match. I carry that certainty in every heartbeat. He showed her the entry. She read it, touched the words with gentle fingers, then kissed him with a tenderness that spoke volumes. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance. Inside, a human and a Veltharian had found their own language of love, one built from crystals and journals, touch and trust, spoken words and preserved emotions. They had opened the wrong door and found the right future. And in the vast darkness of space, that was enough. The end.